On the 6th of November 1994, Jan Balmain stepped out of her Newcastle home and excitedly made her way to the Newcastle train station. Jan was excited because she was meeting her daughter to go and have lunch with her before her daughter was due to leave the next day to go on a magical 6-week tour of Japan with her dance troupe. So Jan wanted to see her daughter just before she left and wish her luck and get ready to spend the next 6 weeks waiting for her daughter to return home. However, as Jan stood on the platform of Newcastle Station, a very bad feeling began to wash over her. As she waited for her beautiful blonde-haired daughter to disembark the train, she began to realise that the last of the passengers had gotten off, the train had begun to pull out, and her daughter never got off the train. Her daughter hadn't called to say that she couldn't make it, her daughter hadn't called to say she had a change of plans, and her daughter hadn't called to say that she'd be late. So why was she not amongst the passengers, and where was she? Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Welcome here if you are new. I'm Andrea.M. and this is Missing Down Under. Today's story includes a missing model, a single cork high-heeled shoe, and another, as yet, unsolved disappearance here in Australia. But before we try to unravel who perhaps murdered the model, I would like to remind you to like, share and subscribe, hit the bell button, and most importantly, this helps me to continue making more videos for you guys just like this one. I would love to thank everybody who has subscribed to me already in the short amount of time I've been on YouTube. You guys rock and it just means the world to me. But I still need more people to like, share, subscribe and sign up to me. So if you could do that before we get into the video, takes a second and it's for free, I'd really appreciate it. So now let's just get into today's case. In 1994, Ravelle Balmain was a 22-year-old, blue-eyed, blonde-haired bombshell with her whole life ahead of her. The Sydney model and dancer was about to leave for 6 amazing weeks in Japan with her dance troupe. She was happy, she was excited. She also had a new boyfriend who she was already head over heels in love with, named Pierce Fisher Pollard. She had a promising modelling career and a promising dancing career all mapped out in front of her, and she was ready for it all. So why would she have disappeared on the very night before she was due to leave? It was after Ravelle failed to meet up with her boyfriend Pierce Fisher Pollard or return any of his calls on the evening of November 5, the same day that she went missing. He went to the police and reported her as a missing person. Ravelle and Pierce were very happy and in the first few weeks of a new relationship, so it was out of character for Ravelle to completely blank out on him like that. Ravelle's mother also contacted the police after Ravelle failed to call or show up for their lunch date, and while Ravelle came from a very good eastern suburbs family, where she grew up with her parents Jan and her dad Ivor Balmain and her sister Sue Ellen, Ravelle was also harbouring a very, very dark secret that neither her family or her boyfriend or many of her close friends knew about. So when the police started to look into the particulars of Ravelle's disappearance, they actually found out that Ravelle had been working for an escort agency. And as these cases always go, there's lots of horrible twists and turns and coincidences that happened on November 5 the day that Ravelle went missing. So for about 6 weeks before she went missing, Ravelle had been working secretly as an escort for a high-end call girl agency called Select Companions. She was working for two people, Zoran and Jane. Now I hope I say this right. Stanojevic. Zoran and Jane Stanojevic. So when the police questioned Jane Stanojevic, who was the madam of the brothel where Ravelle was working, she would go on to tell the police that they also let the girls go to their clients' houses, which in retrospect probably was not a very safe practice. Jane would also go on to tell the police that they screened their clients very carefully. They made the girls check in and check out when they would attend a client's home and when they were leaving, so that if they didn't call in at the time arranged before they left, that Jane would know there would be a problem and to maybe try and call the home or to call the police if something had in fact happened to one of the girls. However, on the day Ravelle went missing, she did call Jane. She called Jane and she said, I'm fine, I'm here at the client's home, I'll call you when I'm done. So Jane gets the call from Ravelle. So she got to the client's home at about 3:30 in the afternoon. She was booked in for 2 hours and she called Jane back at exactly 5:50 p.m. on the evening of November 5th and said, all good, I'm done, I'm safe, I'm finished, I'm leaving now. And that was the last anybody ever heard from Ravelle Balmain. So in another twist, and this happens a lot with girls who are working as an escort, they don't, it's not something you want your friends and family to really know about. And Ravelle was just doing this because she needed the money. She needed the money to go to Japan with her dance troupe. And this was another horrible twist in the case. This was to be her actual last appointment working as an escort. She had decided to make the few weeks in Japan the start of her new life. And, she was happy, she was in love, she had this lovely new boyfriend, and she wanted to start her life with him. So she was actually going to quit the escort business on the day that she went missing. So Jane would actually go on to tell the police that Ravelle had 3 aliases that she went by because she wouldn't want her family and friends to know what she was doing. And she went by Rachel, Monique and Misha were her aliases while she was working for Select Companions. So this is where we come to the persons of interest in Ravelle's case. So the next day, when she doesn't turn up and her mother goes to the police following her boyfriend attending the police station the night before, the police start looking into who saw Ravelle last. So in the course of their investigations, they were told that she had attended a house in the Kingsford area owned by a man named Gavin Owen Samer, and he is our first person of interest in this case. Unfortunately, it turns out that there are at least 3 who could have been responsible for the disappearance of Ravelle. So on the night in question when Ravelle did in fact go missing, as I just told you, she has told her boss that yes, I'm finished and I'm heading out. But when the police came round to question Gavin Owen Samer, he would tell them a slightly different story. So Ravelle has told her boss, as we've just covered, that she has left Gavin Owen Samer's house at 5:50 p.m. and that she was heading out, she was done, and see ya. The thing was, that wasn't actually what happened, as the police would find out as they questioned Gavin Owen Samer into his last recollections of Ravelle. And it turns out that Ravelle was quite a secretive person, that she held a lot of secrets from people, and it could have been what played a part in her going missing. So what's supposed to happen is she's supposed to attend his house, give him her services and leave. But that didn't happen that night. Apparently, Ravelle and Gavin had a pre-arrangement of their own that he was going to pay her a little extra money for, and she was to accompany him to the Red Tomato Inn after their appointment. And he would go on to tell the police from Task Force Aramac, that was the investigation into Ravelle going missing, that they had finished up what they were doing at his home and that he had taken her out and they had attended the Red Tomato Inn. He would also tell the police that he paid for Ravelle's services with a check and that he had paid for apple cider and for champagne after their assignation. I guess maybe she told him that she was leaving the next day and they're having like a little celebratory, okay, this is the last time drink. Who knows? However, when the police start looking into the CCTV footage and the witnesses that were actually there at the specified time that Samer told them that he was there with Ravelle, there was no footage of he and Ravelle ever being inside that pub. Nobody remembered them being there, and there were no check stubs. No check stubs could be found for his payment to Ravelle, nor could they be found for the purchases that he told the police he had made at the Red Tomato Inn, where he was supposedly supposed to be having after get-together drinks with Ravelle. I think that's the nicest way I can put it, because we all knew what she was there for. So it was when the police start to question his girlfriend, and oh yeah, this guy had a girlfriend at the time, she would go on to tell police that she was surprised to come home and find that his car was absolutely spotless. It had been recently cleaned. He had also cleaned and tidied up the bedroom, even going as far as to wash the sheets. And she said this was extremely out of character for him. And then she has also witnessed, I guess, you know, their boyfriend or girlfriend, she's witnessed Gavin with his shirt off, and he was covered in scratches and he had a bite mark on his middle finger. So that kind of puts him in a very suspicious place. But the police couldn't find any evidence of violence in the home or the car, probably because he'd already cleaned it up. And there was none of her belongings found in his home. There was nothing to indicate a struggle or anything like that. However, as the police searched the streets surrounding Samer's Kingsford home, they did find scattered over a number of blocks her cane makeup bag, her house keys, one cork-heeled shoe, and her diary. Now, these were all things that Ravelle would have needed to have with her at all times. Even though she was quitting the escort business, you would think that she would probably have had her itinerary for her trip all planned out in her diary. The way she lived her life, she had to be very meticulous. And, you know, she would have written everything in this diary. She would have been making sure that she wasn't double booking clients when she was going to be doing things with her boyfriend, or, you know, double booking clients when she needed to be at things with her family. So back then, you have to remember, this is 1994. We had cell phones, but they weren't like they are now with the diary features and the calendar. So she would have had everything in her diary and she would have had it on her at all times. Interestingly enough as well, it says that her makeup bag, her keys, her diary, and one shoe was found. They haven't actually elaborated on whether Ravelle's wallet was found with her, like what happened to her check and her money that she would have received from Gavin Owen Samer for her services that afternoon. So did he actually pay her the money? Did he write the check and then take it back? We may never know, because her purse has never been found either. So the police questioned Samer, they questioned his girlfriend, but with a lack of evidence, the case ground to a stop. So now we jump almost 20 years after Ravelle has gone missing. And an author, John Dale, wrote a fictional novel called Detective Work, and I believe it's still available. You can look it up. It's probably available online or at any online bookshop. And it's called Detective Work by John Dale. And it was actually a fictional novel, but it was based on Ravelle Balmain's case. And he believes, after studying the case for years, that the police were remiss in their first early investigations of Ravelle's disappearance. He says that the police had made an early mistake, that they never searched Seymour's home in the days after Ravelle went missing. They also did not do a thorough search of his car. They only talked to him, and they didn't also ask him for the clothes he would have been wearing at the time that he was with Ravelle. None of that was done, and the chain of evidence was broken. It was already broken as far as I can see. Like they've said, his girlfriends told him that he had thoroughly cleaned his car and he had thoroughly cleaned their bedroom, washed the sheets, and this was extremely out of character for him. He also had signs of some kind of violence on him. However, he was having an afternoon with a call girl. He could have said to her, hey, I like it rough, go for it. It could have been scratches inflicted during his time with Ravelle that weren't actually associated with an attack. We'll never know that for sure, but the police did not do due diligence in looking more closely into Gavin Owen Seymour. At a coronial inquest in 1999, it revealed the police involved at the time also never called in the crime scene experts to assess Seymour, his home, or his car. Also, during this inquest, the coroner did rule that he did believe that Ravelle Balmain had in fact been murdered. So this goes on for years, and while Seymour remained a main person of interest, the police were unable to move forward owing to the lack of evidence, motive, and the fact that her body had never been found. However, and this is the kind of thing in these cases that kind of makes me feel a little bit angry, that they didn't look into this person like they should have, because things happened with Gavin Owen Seymour in the years that followed Ravelle's disappearance that may not have happened at all if they had looked into him a little closer. So after the coronial inquest in 1999, Seymour left Sydney for Tasmania, where he lived until 2018. Upon his return to Sydney, he pled guilty to charges laid by his own sister of theft. Yes, you heard that correctly. He had stolen from his own sister. In 2019, he was convicted of assault, occasioning bodily harm, stalking, and intimidation of an elderly woman named Rosa Rosenberg. He was acting as a carer for Mrs. Rosenberg at this time, and she would go on to tell John Dale that she believed Seymour was a psychopath who slept with a knife under his pillow and had touched her in a very inappropriate manner. And these were what the charges were for. He had touched an elderly woman in an inappropriate manner, and he stalked her, he frightened her, and he was supposed to be caring for Rosa Rosenberg. However, and another horrid twist in this story, and this is what really makes me angry. I mean, this is an old lady, and, she's in her twilight years. She should just be enjoying peace and serenity. She should be able to trust the person who comes into her home to care for her. However, the charges were dropped against Gavin Owen Seymour after Rosa Rosenberg passed away in an explosion in her apartment. And again, as with Ravelle Balmain's disappearance, the police still were failing to prove who actually made the explosion happen, whether it was just an accident, whether it was deliberate. There was no proof that anybody had been in Rosa's apartment at the time of the explosion except for poor Mrs. Rosenberg herself, and she died. Now, I think it's a pretty safe bet that he may have been involved, but there was no concrete proof, and Gavin Owen Samer is walking free to this very day. He had been questioned by the police, but they had no proof, and then a local news service that we have over here called The Current Affair actually stalked and tracked down Samer, so karma for him. And he was said to have sworn and screamed at the reporters, and then he actually went to the police and reported A Current Affair for stalking him. So he's a terrific sort of a person, and he's walking free to this very day, and who knows what else he's been up to in this time. So that is where we finish with Gavin Owen Samer. However, this is not where the story of Ravelle Balmain ends. We have another person of interest to look at. So while it's a pretty safe bet that Gavin Owen Samer may have been responsible for Ravelle's disappearance, a drunken conversation overheard at a party a few weeks after the model had gone missing shone the light on yet another person of interest. Former Sydney playboy Mark Coulton. Coulton was one of Ravelle's many clients, one of the wealthiest in fact. He was formerly of Palm Beach, and in the 1990s he was one of the main players in Sydney. He owned a nightclub, he owned many businesses, most of which were quite unscrupulous, and he had allegedly been overheard proclaiming loudly, whilst intoxicated, at a party that Ravelle had been whacked and was now 10 feet under. At Ravelle's 1999 inquest, Coulton admitted to using Ravelle's services, and he's like, oh yeah, I had her come to my home maybe 2 or 3 times. However, as the inquests went on and more witnesses were called, a man by the name of Coughlin would go on to tell the coronial inquest that Coulton had used Ravelle's services on numerous occasions and had bragged to his friend that he had had Ravelle come to his home for sexual assignations as many as 12 times a week. So that is in contrast to what he told the police of, oh yeah, maybe I've had her come over 2 or 3 times. He would also go on to brag to Coughlin that he had given Ravelle a $1,000 gift, as she had told him that she wanted to quit the escort agency and go overseas with her dance troupe, and him being the lovely stand-up person that he was, decided he would help Ravelle, and he would give her $1,000 to go overseas. However, this also doesn't track with the things that he told his friends. He told his friends that he was giving Ravelle a $1,000 to $500 allowance every week. So that begs the question of, if he was giving her this much money every week, why would he just give her a one-off gift of $1,000 because she was going overseas? Now, Ravelle was doing this work, planning to go overseas and to start a whole brand new life when she returned to Australia in the 6 weeks after her dance stint in Japan was finished. So if he was giving her all this money before she went missing, why would he give her a one-off $1,000 gift? Did he just do it to be nice? Did he just think, oh yeah, maybe she needs some extra money? That is something else we will probably never know. He would also go on to tell the officers that he and Ravelle were good friends, that he thought a lot of her, but Contrastingly, Coughlin would then tell the police that in the drunken conversation with Colton at the party, he would tell Coughlin that Balmain was, and I quote, a nasty little gold digger, and that she was a drug addict. And he also gave evidence that was tendered into the inquest and had told him that people were gullible and stupid. And he also said to Coughlin, and a few other people heard him say this, that you heard the story about Ravelle's disappearance. It's a load of crap. No one will find her body. That's what she gets for ripping off a brothel owner. Yes, you heard me right, for ripping off her boss, which is something that Jane and Zoran had never said to the police. They were happy with Ravelle. She was a model employee. Everybody liked her. Zoran and Jane liked her. They had no problems with Ravelle whatsoever. So why then was he trying to deflect the blame onto Zoran and Jane for Ravelle's disappearance? Makes for a very interesting point. No one will find her body. That's what she gets for ripping off a brothel owner and drugging clients and stealing their money. Now, you would think if that was coming up, the clients would be complaining to Jane and Zoran, the owners of the brothel, that one of their girls was stealing their money, that she was drugging them, that all of this was going on. However, Jane and Zoran had never had a complaint about Ravelle. Her clients loved her. I mean, in the line of work she was doing, she was very popular. People liked her. She was a nice girl doing a horrid job, I guess because she thought that was the only way she could get money together quickly to go off and start this brilliant new life. And I find that really sad. She was so young. She was only 22. And I guess she was doing what she thought she had to do at the time. Back in 1994, it was very hard to get work. It was very hard to get jobs that actually paid the money that you would need to do all the things that you wanted to do. And I would say that's why she turned to the escort agency in the first place. So while this was tendered into evidence for the coronial inquest, it was soon after discarded as Coughlin admitted that both he and Colton had been under the influence and that he could not now be 100% sure of his own testimony. You heard that right. So Colton, it turns out, is also a convicted felon associated with drug trafficking and has remained a person of interest until this day. However, because of his family and his standing in the community in Sydney, he has been very well protected. He has been arrested of drug trafficking and of theft in the years and months and decades after Ravelle Balmain's disappearance. So it kind of speaks to him as being a very shady character in the same vein as Gavin Owen Samer. So it was after this the case went completely cold. Nobody had seen Ravelle. Nobody knows where she is. So who did it? The coroner has ruled her death as a murder. So who murdered Ravelle Balmain? Zoran and Jane also pretty heavily investigated as suspects, but there was still no proof of any wrongdoing on their behalf. But Jane actually feels that the police have missed something along the way and somebody out there knows something. So who did it? Who murdered the model and hid her body and took her away from her family and friends? In 2019, her father, Ivor, died and he never found out what happened to his daughter. However, her mother and her sister Sue Ellen to this day are still asking the question, what happened to Ravelle? Was it a disgruntled employer unhappy with his employee supposedly drugging and stealing from clients and quitting the business to move overseas? Was it an obsessed client, perhaps? Was it Gavino and Samer, who didn't want to let Ravelle go because he knew she was going overseas? Was it Colton? Seemed like he was pretty close with Ravelle. He was availing himself of her services at least 12 times a week. Could he have been obsessed with her and decided that if he couldn't have her, nobody could? But we need to take a moment to look at Ravelle as not just a missing person or an escort. She was somebody's daughter, she was somebody's friend, she was somebody's sister, and she was somebody's girlfriend. And her boyfriend, Pierce Fisher Pollard, to this day is still searching for answers. Her disappearance has followed him his entire life and has made it very difficult for him to engage in another relationship with anybody else. So please keep in mind Ravelle's sister and her mother and her boyfriend. And to this day, although the coroner has ruled the case closed and that Ravelle's death is quite possibly a murder, the New South Wales Police are still offering a reward for any information on the disappearance or possible murder of Ravelle Balmain, and you can call them on 1800 333 000 if you have any information, no matter how small, into Ravelle's disappearance. The police would love to hear from you. If you know something, please let them know. I'm not going to say what the reward value is here because we don't want a bunch of people just ringing the police station hoping to get their hands on some money. This is not what this is about. If you saw something, if you heard something, no matter how small, please call the New South Wales Police and let them know if you know anything. So that's going to do it for today's story. Thank you so much again for watching. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe so I can continue to make videos for you guys just like this one. And please don't forget to join me on Friday for another episode of the Oz Files. The Truth is Outback. I will have another scary Australian ghost story for you. So have your drinks and snacks ready. It's going to be a good one. And until then, I'll see you all soon. Bye.